I'm sitting at a desk. I have a whole different setup because we're gonna tier rank some R Fantasy bingo squares. I've been avoiding watching everyone else's videos about the new R Fantasy bingo card because I didn't want to be influenced, but I think I'm finally ready to give you some suggestions and tell you my plans for what I'm hoping to read for the 2026-27 R Fantasy bingo card. Welcome or welcome back to Espresso Shots and Epic Plots. I'm Genevieve. Grab a beverage and settle in so we can plan your 26 R Fantasy bingo card. So if you're unfamiliar with R Fantasy, it is a subreddit on Reddit. If you're unfamiliar with Reddit, then that's a whole other layer that we have to worry about there. It is a bingo card of 25 prompts that you fulfill with either fantasy, science fiction, or horror books. I would say in the grand scheme of reading challenges, it's pretty difficult. You can only have one reread. You cannot repeat an author with the exception of the short story prompt. Then you can read a full-length novel by an author if you read their short story. There is actually another exception this year. They have a hard mode and a hero mode, although I rarely hear people talk about hero mode. It is a traditional bingo card. You can try to get diagonal, up and down, side to side. Most people that I see, however, try to get a blackout. R Fantasy runs from April 1st to March 31st, which is kind of an odd time frame. Last year was my first time doing the R Fantasy bingo card, and I did it. I got a blackout. I got a hard mode bingo. I feel like it was crossways. You can check out my video all about that right up here. And when I was planning it last year, I watched a lot of videos to get suggestions. I think one of the harder parts are some of the prompts you can't really plan for. It's hard to know whether a book fits into a prompt unless you've already read it. That being because the purpose of the bingo challenge is to introduce yourself to lots of new authors, which is great. That's what I did last year. I read books that I probably wouldn't have heard of otherwise, many of which I really enjoyed. I will post the link to the Reddit page that has all of the descriptions. The card has tons of other recommendations, but I didn't want to just go square by square and read off every card. So I thought I would tier rank. This is my first tier ranking. I thought I would tier rank all of the prompts by how difficult I think they're going to be. I'm using Canva to tier rank. I realize that there are a lot of tier ranking websites, but I am familiar with Canva and I like Canva, and it gave me some more creativity than some of the other ones. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to my tiers. At the top in green, I have free space energy. These are the prompts that I think are going to be super easy. I can think of 100 books to read. I can think of 100 books to suggest, maybe not 100, but these are going to be no problem. The next one is choices, but with constraints. So similarly, I can think of a lot of options for these. I'm not really worried about these, but there are going to be some specifics that I have to think about when planning out and that you're going to have to think about when planning these out. My next one, I know it sounds kind of weird. So my next one is my unintentional, intentional picks. These are prompts where I think that I'm going to stumble upon a book. I might be reading a book that I was not intending on using for this, and I might find out that it fits the prompt. That would be the unintentional part. The intentional part of it is there's going to be some prompts where I have to time. It's going to be a matter of timing and making sure that I read them at the correct place or in the correct order. You'll see when we get to some of the prompts. My orange category is my niche fit. These are prompts that are very specific, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of choices. That doesn't mean that there's no choices. Maybe I should say they ask for very specific requirements, and considering that I know what I like to read and I know what I don't like to read, I think there's going to be fewer books that meet these requirements. And then my last one is boss level. These are my problem squares. These are the ones where I'm probably going to need help. I've already done a little bit of scouring, and I'm still struggling to come up with options that really feel like something I want to read. I took all of the 25 squares, I separated them all out, and I have them across the bottom here. And I'm going to place them in one of these categories. And I'm going to tell you my current plans. I have those over here, so I wasn't using my screen, dual using my screen. I'm going to tell you my current plans, and I'm going to give you at least one, maybe two suggestions from things that I've read. One of the things I'm trying to do this year, this is kind of my new twist. I'm not trying to get hard mode on everything. I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I am going to try to to read from what I own. I'm making a conscious effort to read down my TBR this year. I have a ton of books that meet these requirements, and maybe it's not something that I already own, but I know it's something I'm gonna buy. Maybe it's the next in a series that I already own, or maybe it's a new, actually most of them are next in series. So this is my no-buy-ish our fantasy bingo plans. These are not in order of the cards, so they're in no particular-ish order. They're in the order that I got them in a nice little line. All right, so right out the gate, our first square, judge a book by its title. This is a pretty fun one, I think. Read a book based on the title. This can be a title so epic you had to pick it up, or so weird and off-putting that you needed to know why it was called this. And then hard mode is that you dive in without reading the blurb. I think for this first square, I know I'm gonna start right out the gate here, like hemming and hawing. I think this first one, judge a book by its title. I feel like there's a lot of choices here. I can't, oh gosh, because this is so personal. I almost feel like it's like free space energy, but I think if you want to go hard mode, then it really becomes intentional, because I definitely own a lot of books with weird titles, but I usually read what they're about. Choices with constraints. There's a lot of choices. Yeah, I'm putting that one here because I think that's a good spot for this one. Some recommendations I have for this would be The Annual Migration of Clouds, which is a novella by Premi Mohammed. It's actually, I think there's 2 of them, maybe 3 of them. Actually, I think there's 3 of them now. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. The title doesn't really tell you what it's about. So I think this is a good example of something for this. Books that I intend to read, I unfortunately already know what they're about. So I've got Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove, and then That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming, which I don't even feel like you have to read the back of, because the title pretty much tells you what it's about, but it's odd and you want to know more. So even though those are the current books that I have on here, I don't know that that's going to be what I count. I feel like throughout the year, there's going to be some picks that come up for this one. Okay, next up, murder mystery. Main plot focuses on solving a murder. Hard mode is that the main character is not a detective. So I thought of a bunch of books that fell into this category. However, I do think this is a choices but with constraints. This is a plot point in a lot of sci-fi books, and a lot of fantasy books, and a lot of horror books, in all honesty. But not every sci-fi fantasy book has murder in it. So there are a lot of choices, but you're going to have to make sure that you pick one that, talks about a murder. This, I would say, is the choices with constraints. So if you want to meet hard mode for this, I'm going to recommend that you read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is not ever described as a murder mystery, but it really is a locked room mystery. And in this one, your main character is not a detective. In fact, she cares very little about what's happening, and her glib sense of humor is what makes it really interesting. Books that I want to read: The Hearth Witch's Guide to Magic and Murder by Kiri Callaghan. I feel like the title kind of implies that there's murder in that one. And then The Library at Hellebore by Cassandra Kaw apparently has a murder mystery in it. So those are 2 books that I own that I plan to read to fulfill this square. The next one, Vacation Spot. Oh, I feel like this is our first free space energy. So, I'll tell you, story takes place somewhere you'd want to visit, either fictional or non-fictional. This is subjective, as everyone has different tastes. Anything can count. And this I thought was cute. There is no hard mode. It says, no hard mode, you deserve a break. I feel like this is free space energy. However, when I was trying to think of things, I kept thinking of some of my favorite books to recommend, but I was like, I don't know that I would want to visit London during that time period, or I don't know that I would want to be a woman during that time period, or in that book there was a war going on. So maybe not every book meets this criteria, but I think there's a lot of recommendations, a lot of things that fall fall into the cozy genre. Some more not epic, lighthearted books that I read that I would say fall into almost like the romance fantasy category. A Dark and Secret Magic by Wallace Kinney, and then Perfectly Wicked by Lindsay Levies. Those are both like witchy fall, October-y kind of vibe books. Perfectly Wicked takes place in an apple orchard. A Dark and Secret Magic is about a hedge witch that lives on the outskirts of town. So they're those like small town kind of vibes. The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst is the second in the Spell Shop, which is just a cozy fantasy series. That's one that's on my TBR that I already own that could meet this criteria. And then I've always actually wanted to go to India, so I threw The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri on here. However, I know that women are not treated very well, I'm pretty sure based on the plot in this version of Asia, and so I don't know that this is the exact fantasy world that I want to visit, but I won't know until I read it. So I'm going to put it on there for now and then we'll see. The next one, Politics and Court Intrigue. I personally think this is giving free space energy. The majority of fantasy books revolve around some sort of like court politics. A lot of sci-fi books have political intrigue. Well, hold on. Maybe I should, actually, you know what? Maybe I will move this to choices, but with constraints, because not everything has like political or court royal intrigue. That is a subgenre of fantasy, but it's a pretty big subgenre. So some recommendations that I have would be, I just recently read The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft. This is a husband and wife duo that is solving a crime for the royal family, so it definitely has some royal politics going on in it. The Summer War by Naomi Novik is a novella that I read that deals with a lot of court intrigue and court politics, if you will. A book that I just bought relatively recently was The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, and my understanding is that this is all about it's a family that is in the political line, and everybody in the family dies except for the main character. He's given this whole like royal court and he has to figure out how to deal with it, and it's supposed to be really super cute and you just want to hug everyone. I don't know, that's what I've heard. Author of color. This one, again, I'm gonna put in, I'm either thinking choices but with constraints, or I don't want to say unintentional picks. Okay, I'm gonna put this in between. Here's why. It is really hard sometimes to figure out demographics about particular authors, and we should never make assumptions based on names and things like that. So I think there's definitely some books that you could be interested in reading, and unless you are looking at the dust jacket or finding out more about the author, then you don't know what their ethnicity or background is. But I do know that there are a huge number of choices when it comes to reading authors of color, and we should definitely be supporting our BIPOC authors and our authors of color. I recently read An Arcane Inheritance by Camila Cole that I did a whole vlog on, along with The Hexologist too. And then another novella, if you're interested in more of a novella, Psychopomp and Circumstance by Eden Royce. So An Arcane Inheritance by Camila Cole. Camila Cole is a Jamaican-born Black author, and that plays a pretty prominent role in the book. And then Psychopomp and Circumstance, Eden Royce is a Black American. Some books that I plan to read. This has, again, a huge list. Really, like, that's more of why I'm leaning towards like choices with constraints, because there really are a great number, but if you're not looking for it, if it's something you're not actively seeking out, you might think this is difficult. But some books that I want to read, I own A Forgery of Fate by Elizabeth Lim, a Chinese-born American. Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake. Olivia Blake is Filipino-American. An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir, she's Pakistani-American. I, Medusa is a book I acquired recently it's about Medusa by Ayana Gray, and she's Black American. One-word title: Free Space Energy. I mean, there is a huge list of books that I want to read, a huge list of books that I have read that meet this criteria. I think this is, if you can't find one of these, you're not trying. Some books that I would recommend: Vicious by V.E. Schwab, that's the first in the Villain series. Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, actually that's the beginning of a quartet, and all of them so far are one-word titles. Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, if you're looking for a novella. And then Recursion by Blake Crouch, if you're looking for more of a sci-fi recommendation. I've read all those, I recommend all of them. Some books that I own that I would definitely meet this criteria: Catabasis or Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, Song, Circe by Madeline Miller, Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher, and Silver Cloak by L.K. Stevens. I probably won't be able to use, I read a ton of T. Kingfisher, so I have to be careful about where I put their books because I can only use their books once, and they write a ton of them and they fit in all kinds of categories. I think right now my heart, like I'm leaning towards Silver Cloak for this, or maybe Circe, just because I think I can use some of these other titles for other things. Older protagonist. This is one of my first that I'm actually gonna put between unintentional and niche fit here. So I'm gonna put this between yellow and orange. So I mentioned T. Kingfisher. She is an author that writes predominantly older protagonists. However, her older protagonists, I would say, are my age. They're not your typical like young 20-somethings. Sometimes are in their 40s. And this particular square is the main character needs to be, I believe it's 50 or older, if I remember right. So it says story features a main character who is at least 50. Hard mode is that the protagonist is not really old because of immortality. It's not because of their species. It's not because they're a vampire or a god or an elf or a dwarf or something like that. So that's hard mode. So even though T. Kingfisher writes older protagonists, they are not usually 50. My mother and I also read The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. She's a mother. She's definitely not in her 50s. So this is one that I think is going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to be one that I may stumble upon, which is why it's kind of in that unintentional picks. But this is definitely a niche fit. You don't usually see older protagonists in book, especially like sci-fi epic fantasy books where there's a lot of action happening. That doesn't mean that I don't have suggestions. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. One of my recommendations would be to read any of the already written works in the Anna and Din series or The Shadows of the Leviathan by Robert Jackson Bennett. There are two main characters, I would argue, in this. One of them is younger, that would be Din, but Anna is an older protagonist. We don't actually know how old she is, but she is described as being older. And so I would assume she is over the age of 50. So that's where my niche kind of like, I'm trying to fit it into a box. And there is a third one in that book in that series coming out this year called A Trade of Blood. And so that's one of the things I plan on reading for this square. Another contender that I have that I own is Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. So this is part of the Discworld series. This is part of the Witches vein of the Discworld series. I previously tried Mort, which is part of the Death sub-series. I was kind of meh about it, but I've been told that Witches is the Witch series and then the Guards is a little bit better. I'm gonna try that one. Although the main character in Equal Rights starts out young, she is a witch that is trained by a woman that I believe is in her 70s, Granny Weather, it's Weather something. So she's supposed to be an older protagonist for sure. Non-human protagonist. I feel like a lot of the squares are pretty self-explanatory. Non-human protagonist features a main character that's not human. Again, this is definitely, I'm gonna put this one up here. It's fairly easy to find sci-fi and fantasy books where the main character is not a human. We have robots, we have vampires, we have, I mean, even horror books for that matter. We have aliens that come up, so there's tons of examples of books where this meets the criteria. Let me give you some recommendations. I am almost done with the Murderbot series. Starting with All Systems Red by Martha Wells is a great example. Your main character is a robot in that, and he is the main character throughout the entire series. I'm gonna continue that series. I just finished Fugitive Telemetry, and I'm ready to read System Collapse, I think is the next one. I thought the series was done, but she's releasing Platform Decay. So that's an option. And then another option that I own related to this is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, which is about vampires. And so that is another example of a non-human protagonist. The hard mode for this is that there are no human POVs in the story. Neither of these would meet hard mode for that. I don't stress about hard mode right now. That's maybe future Genevieve will worry about hard mode. These next two I'm going to do together. Duology Part 1 and Duology Part 2. Pretty self-explanatory, but I will explain the caveats. Duology Part 1, read the first book in a duology. Hard mode is that it's by an author you haven't read from before. And then Duology Part 2 do is read the second book in a duology. For this square, you are allowed to read the same author you read for duology part 1. So if you want to knock out a duology and take care of both of these squares, then you're good to go. Hard mode for the part 2 is that you finish a different duology than the one you started. This is one where I'm going to have to think about, if I want to meet hard mode, then I need to think about how I'm going to read this. Duologies are great because it wraps things up pretty quickly. Usually we see these like big long series that are published, but there are definitely plenty to recommend. So let me recommend some duologies and tell you what I plan to read. So some duologies that I read and enjoyed both of them, so this would help you knock out both squares if you're not trying to get hard mode. The Anatomy by Dana Schwartz. That is a technically young adult series. It is pretty light on the fantasy element. I personally think it meets the criteria, but it definitely wasn't a main part of the story. Curse Bearer was a novella duology by Veronica Roth. It was really good. If it turns out there's going to be another one, then it's not a duology anymore, but as of now, it's a duology. And then another duology that I began and finished last year, The House of the Dead by Nikki Powell-Preto. The first one is Bonesmith, and I think the second one is Ghostsmith, but the whole duology is called The House of the Dead. It's considered YA, but I would say it classifies more as new adult. It did not read YA to me. A duology part 1 that I own that I want to try is Silver Cloak by L.K. Stephen. The second one of that is not out yet, and she's not an author that I've read from before, so that would meet hard mode for me. And then I also own both of Kate Elliott's, I don't remember what the name of the duology is. The second one is The Nameless Land. So I think my plan is to read Silver Cloak as the duology part 1, and then to read The Nameless Land and The Witch Roads by Kate Elliott, and then the second one would meet the duology part 2. I've heard that for that duology, once you're done with the first one, you want to pick up the second one immediately. And they were actually both published really closely together too. Like you didn't have to wait a long time. 5 short stories. I'm going to put 5 short stories into niche fit. I think this is a niche fit because if you don't like short stories, this is difficult for some people. And I never really thought I was a short story Whoa, sorry. I kicked my camera. I never really saw myself as a short story person either. This is a classic square that our fantasy always puts on their bingo card. It's on every single bingo card. There's some that show up over and over again. This is one that last year I was pretty convinced I was going to swap out. You are allowed to swap out 1 square for previous squares, and I for sure thought this was going to be the square that I had to swap out. But then I found that through Amazon, the evil overlord Amazon, if you have an Amazon Prime account, there are a number of short story collections that you can read. They come in like around the holidays. They do a lot of romance ones for, Valentine's Day, or they'll do like holiday themed ones for, Christmas and Hanukkah. And I feel like they do some in the spring. But I found a fantasy sci-fi version of these same free short story collections. And I actually ended up reading 2 short story collections last year. One was a little more fantasy based. The other one was sci-fi based. The second one I liked way more of the stories. It was more of the sci-fi one, and it was completely free. I was able to download them. I could even get the audio through Audible for free. Like it did like a read along essentially. So that was The Time Traveler's Passport, was the series of 6 short stories that I read for free on Prime. I don't have any specific plans for this square. Amazon puts these out multiple times a year. I would say there's at least 1 a year in the sci-fi or 1 a year in the fantasy. They do a bunch of romance ones too. I know that one of those is going to come up. Short stories are just not something that I really enjoy, and I don't really plan on buying a collection of them when they are in like small chunks. Like these Amazon ones tend to be 5 or 6, and they're by authors I know. I do usually end up enjoying some of them, or I enjoy them enough, I would say. That being said, Amal El-Motar's Season of Glass and Iron, I think is what it's called. I do have that on hold at the library for whenever I get it, and I believe that is a series of short stories. I read It's Not a River Runs Through It, that's a movie, the novella that she came out with last year, and really enjoyed it. And it had some of the short stories as like a teaser on the end of it. And so I started to listen to some of those, and I did really enjoy them. So that is another option that I could use for this as well. Here's another one that is a standard square they always have. Our Fantasy Book Club or read along. So let me kind of give you the skinny on this one. one. Our Fantasy is a subreddit on Reddit, and they have various book clubs that go on throughout the year. I think it's one a month. They have Females in Fiction. They have, I'm trying to remember, I don't even know the names of all of them. New Voices is another one, which is like up and coming authors. And then Happily Ever After. I believe they have at least 2 other ones that I just don't know the name of. Every month they put out a list, they vote. It's just like a regular book club. They pick a book, and then people plan out when they're gonna meet for discussions, like when in the book they're gonna meet, when in the calendar they're gonna meet, and then you do a Reddit-based discussion. This square asks you to either read a book that's one of the book clubs, to either read it with everyone and actually participate, that would be hard mode, or you can also read books that have previously been a part of the book club. And then they have a spreadsheet of like hundreds of books. This one honestly is free space energy unless you're trying to do hard mode. If you're trying to do hard mode, then this one very much becomes an intentional pick. If you're trying to participate and do it when the book club is meeting, then you need to plan on reading that book when it is happening. Otherwise, like I said, they have this huge list of books to introduce you to within all of the different categories. You would have a difficult time finding something you weren't at least mildly interested in reading or something that you would want to read. So I can't really give you any recommendations for that one because it's a huge list and it kind of depends on how you want to participate. I took a glance at it. Right now, some that I have, the New Voices in March, their pick was The Poet Empress, which is a book that I own. In January, Happily Ever After had Violet Thistlethwaite Is Not a Villain Anymore, and the Females in Fantasy had The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. Those are all books that I own that I want to read, and they were picks for some relatively recent Our Fantasy book clubs or read-alongs. But again, I pop on there every once in a while and see what else they have too. So that's another one that I feel like could have free space energy unless you're really trying to do hard mode, in which case that one kind of goes down into the like you need to be very intentional about what you are reading when. But I don't want to put it in the middle because it's not a constraint. So, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll put it in both. I can duplicate. There, it's in both. Haha. Okay, let me move these over. Now I think we're getting into some unique ones. The Afterlife. I'm gonna read the prompt for you because I don't want to mess it up. The story deals with the realm of the dead. This could be communicating with the dead, spirits transferring over, or being set in the afterlife itself. So there's a lot of wiggle room here. Hard mode is the afterlife does not depict a good place or bad place dichotomy. So this is kind of a fun one. I would put this into a niche fit, I think. This is definitely, it's something you see. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but it's also not like a widely used plot device. Books that I read that fit into this category, Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune was really good, made me cry. A lot of books don't make me cry. Just last year, I read The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood, I think is how you say her name. So The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. Actually, no, I read that a couple of years ago, which is a romance, technically, but it's a romance about a girl who dies and then thinks she meets the love of her life in the afterlife and wants to go back. He gets sent back to the living world, and so she wants to go back because she thinks like he's the love of her life. So even though it's a romance, it technically can fall into a fantasy category. Definitely a niche book. There's 2 suggestions. Ones that I own that I plan on reading. This is where Catabasis by R.F. Kuang comes back up. It's 2 people journeying into the underworld to try to save their professor. And then I recently acquired Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. That is supposed to be like somebody in the present and a ghost from the past living in the same house or place in the world or something like that. And so I feel like that might meet this criteria. Very niche, but not completely out of the realm of something that you could find a book for. Game Changer. This is a fun one. I assumed it was going to be one thing, and then when I read it a little closer, I was like, oh, okay, all right, this has some wiggle room to it. Story features a game or competition. I'm gonna go with choices, but with constraints. I think we see games or competitions come up in, hold on, maybe I wanna move this. Like I can think of a lot of them, but maybe that's because that is a trope that I like to read. Some people really just don't like this type of trope. I think it's really big right now, which is why I feel like it falls into this choices but with constraints. Maybe it is niche if this isn't really something that you like. For me, this is choices but with constraints, so I'm gonna leave it that way. I'm making my way through the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. This is perfect for that. If you haven't started that series, this is an excellent reason to start that series. The Raven Scholar would be another good example of this. Some books that I plan to read, continuing to read the Dungeon Crawler Carl books. I haven't yet read Sunrise on the Reaping, which is the newest one in the Hunger Games series. I think The Will of the Many by James Islington, which is another book that I hope to read in the near future, falls under this, if I understand. I haven't read it yet. I feel like it is a trope that shows up a lot, and as long as it's not a trope that you're going to shy away from, this should be relatively easy to find some books for. The next one, Explorers and Rangers. This is one that I think at first might seem like it might be easy, but when you actually read the prompt, it's kind of like, okay, maybe this will be a little bit more difficult. The story features an explorer, a character who travels to investigate an unfamiliar region, or a ranger, a wilderness or forest-oriented warrior frequently specializing in things like stealth, bows, tracking, and other hunting related skills. Hard mode is that they have an animal companion, which is kind of fun. I would say this falls under niche fit, maybe unintentional, but no, I'm gonna go with niche. This isn't like, originally I was like, oh, the Murderbot books, he's exploring, but he's not really. There's usually a job. So I guess it depends on how picky you want to get. The people that he's working for in the first book are exploring and terraforming, but that's not what he's doing. And he's the main character. Everything is from his point of view. So I don't feel like that really counts. Some examples that I read recently, Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. She is definitely an explorer in that. And then I think the entire Emily Wilde series. She is an academic explorer. She's trying to venture into other realms and learn about the fairy world. Books that I want to read, Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I think that might have an explorer or ranger feel to it. Won't know really until I read it. Sorcery and Small Magics by Maiga Ducey. It talks a little bit about how they venture into a mysterious forest, so that might meet the criteria. One I know definitely will, Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson. That one was one that I wasn't sure if it met the criteria for fantasy. I went on Goodreads, that was one of the tags that it got, so I'm gonna count it. Empire of Shadows is definitely, it's like an Indiana Jones style romancy, mythology, historical, whatever kind of book. The next one, I think now we're really getting into like some of the more difficult ones. Unusual Transportation. I guess this depends on how type A you are. Story includes a surprising method of moving from place to place. By unusual, we mean it is out of the ordinary in real life and uncommon to the book's broader genre. Hard mode is that it is not combustion powered or steam powered. This particular square has a lot of detail in it. I wasn't sure if this counted as a recommendation for this. Oh, first let's decide where it goes. I'm gonna put this into no. Oh, this is a tough one. This is something you're gonna unintentionally come across, especially when you're reading science fiction books, but it specifies it's out of the realm in that particular world. So if you're reading a book where everybody travels by spacecraft and your main character travels by spacecraft, it doesn't count. So actually, I'm gonna make this our first boss level. This is one that I think you're gonna unintentionally come upon while you're reading, and I'll probably do the same. I don't think you can seek looking out for a book for this. I have some recommendations from other people. I am personally recommending The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft. Their mode of transportation in that world is described kind of like carriages, but it's a little bit different than carriages. So it is unique and not many people use them. And then there is also a trunk that they have that I think might fall in this criteria. So I'm recommending that-ish. It was one of the first things that popped into my head, probably because it was a recent read of mine. Things that the internet has recommended that I'm gonna see if they meet the criteria. The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, something about that people have said could meet the criteria. And then later on this month, I should be getting This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me, which is the new book by the husband and wife duo Iona Andrews. It's like a portal. She falls into her favorite fantasy book. And so I feel like portal books would meet this criteria, but you kind of have to read it to find out for these. This is is, I think, a boss level square. This is going to be difficult, especially if you're trying to plan. This next one is hilarious. And I also think it's like free space energy. Cat squasher. When I read this, I was like dying laughing. I was like, does it have to kill animals in it? Read a book over 500 pages. And it can't be an omnibus. It can't be multiple books. It just has to be a book that's over 500 pages. The hard mode is over 900 pages. This is free space energy because the number of sci-fi and fantasy books that are ginormous chunkers is ridiculous. I am not worried about, in fact, when I was searching for suggestions, there was like tons of them. I'm going to recommend The Raven Scholar here again. I think that one was almost 700 pages. Babel by R.F. Kuang is over 540 pages. Books that I plan to read, I've got The Sword of Kaigan, which is over 630, Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare, which is 624, Arcana Academy, The Devils, The Red Winter, To Shape a Dragon's Breath. Like when I searched my digital collection, I had like 10 options. This one is free space energy. I think there's a lot of things that I'm going to read that could fall on this criteria. It's just going to be more a matter of like a puzzle piece of where I put other things. Easy peasy. The next one is a pretty fun one. Another unique or interesting one. Feast your eyes on this with an emphasis on feast. Food or a meal is significant to the story's plot. Hard mode that you actually attempt making something that was part of the book. I've read a number of romance and contemporary literature books that definitely have cooking as an element, and then at the end of the book have recipes that you can go and try, but you don't see it in fantasy as much. Last year for our fantasy bingo, I did read a book that would meet criteria for this, but I didn't enjoy it, so I'm not going to recommend it. I can, however, recommend Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz. This very much focuses on robots making, like, it's a very specific type of Asian noodle bowl, like noodle soup, and that is a big component of, it's a little novella, but that's a big component of it. So I would highly recommend that for this if you haven't read it. Two books that I kind of have on my radar, Tea and Alchemy by Sharon Lynn Fisher is a book, I think I have it on my Kindle, and it's one of those like I kind of forgot I had it, but it popped up as a recommendation that I owned. And then A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. I love T. Kingfisher. I'll try just about anything they write, and so I don't own that one yet, but I put it on there because I thought it would be a good one for this criteria, and they're kind of like an auto-buy author for me. I definitely think this is a niche fit. It's one you might accidentally stumble upon because you might read a book and then think, oh, okay, that meets that criteria. The first in the Legends and Lattes book would probably meet this criteria. I've already read that one. I haven't read the next one. I feel like Bookshops and Bone Dust isn't gonna meet the criteria for this because it's more about a bookshop, but the newest one, Brigands and Bread Knives, might meet the criteria for this. I'll have to ask my mom. She read that one. I feel like if it has bread knives in the title, bread should be involved. But a lot of cozy books like that do tend to have food related, like food is comforting. The next square is one that for me is gonna be difficult. So it's middle grade. It's read a book that is middle grade literature. So this is ages 8 to 12, 8 to 14, I think is considered middle grade. I think it might be 8 to 12. Yeah, 8 to 12. March is considered middle grade March. I don't read a lot of middle grade. My daughter, however, obviously reads a lot of middle grade. She is the middle grade. My current plan is to have her pick a book and for us to read it together. Reading is very important in our house. We read a lot, but I actually want the two of us to read together. I'm going to put this between boss level and niche fit because I'm not really going to pick this book for me. I don't seek out middle grade books. I probably should more, especially I am a middle grade teacher. You would think I would want to read things to like keep up with the kids, but it's just not what I tend to seek out or whatever. I did get some recommendations from my daughter, however. She recently read Myth of Monsters, Medusa, so it's part of a series. The one that she read was about Medusa. It's by Catherine Marsh. She gave me like things that happened in the book to tell you about. This particular one focused a lot on the misogyny found in Greek mythology, and this is a middle grade book, people. Another one that would fall into the R fantasy criteria, there's a graphic novel series called Sheets, which I actually have heard other adults recommend. The graphics of this one look really good. I'm just not a graphic novel person. So Sheets by Brenna Thumler. It's a graphic novel that deals with like grief and the afterlife and like family dynamics. It's about a girl that helps run her family's laundromat, and there is a ghost that is haunting the laundromat, and the ghost is literally, he's a sheet. Like, you know, like how you see sheets, ghost sheets. Okay, anyway, the artwork is really beautiful. First Contact. Let's see here. First Contact says, story predominantly features interspecies or interracial meeting for the first time. Hard mode is that it is a non-violent first contact. I think the #1 recommendation that most people are going to make now is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I read that quite a while ago, but I would recommend it. A more unique suggestion that I would make would be The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. I actually read that in college. All of us as freshmen had to read it going into our freshman year. The school that I went to picked like a freshman level book that everybody had to read, and then your first like English paper was about it. They had the author come talk to us, blah, blah, blah. At the time, I think I thought it was a really weird, bizarre book, and I was like, holy crap, what are we reading? I think as an adult, I would probably see it with a totally different lens. There are aspects of that book that still stuck in my head. So something about that book was so profound that it has stuck with me for the years and years since I've read it. I've seen a couple people bring it back up recently. Those are both books that I've read that would meet this criteria. This might fall into a niche or unintentional pick. I think sometimes a twist or a spoiler part of the book is that there is, you know, interspecies alien life forms that you are making contact with. That's not always obvious when you're getting ready to read a book. It is a very specific genre of books, so I'm gonna have it go between intentional, unintentional, and niche here. Books that I own that I think might meet this criteria, one of them I know for sure would. Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. My understanding is that this particular book would meet criteria for this. The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez is another one that people are like, yeah, that could probably fit here. And then one that I know for sure, Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill, is about a woman who makes contact with kind of like a monster in a lake and they befriend each other. That definitely meets the criteria. That would be an example of like an intentional or a niche fit for this. I think the other two are good examples of how it might come across as I'm reading it as to why it meets that criteria. Published in 2026. To me, this is Free Space Energy. I believe, at least I know the past 2 years, Reddit always has a published in whatever year square. There are tons of things that I want to read. I actually haven't read anything published in 2026 yet. I've read a lot of things published in 2025. There are so many books that I want to read that are coming out. If you want to check out, I have my countdown to 2026 video where I talk about all of the books that I want to make sure that I get through in 2026. There is a chunk of them that are coming out. They are being published this year. Hard mode for this is from a debut author, and Sublimation by Isabel J. Kim is coming out this year, and that is a debut by that particular author. So if I get a hold of that one when it comes out, then that would meet hard mode for this. Trans or non-binary protagonist. Last year they had an LGBTQ plus square. This is a more specific version of that square. Story features a trans or non-binary protagonist. The protagonist must not be an alien or robot. I think that's a good qualifier there. And then hard mode for this is that it is set in pre-modern times. I'm gonna have this go between unintentional picks and a niche fit, because it is becoming, in my opinion, it is becoming more common to see trans, non-binary, LGBTQ plus characters in works of fiction. Maybe that's just the books that I seek out or the world that I live in. And it's also, I think, becoming common that that is not the main plot point. So a lot of times I'll read a book and the main character will be trans, non-binary, LGBTQ, and you don't even know it. Like there's nothing about the back of the book that would tell you that. So I feel like you will unintentionally come across numerous books that meet this criteria. Some suggestions: The Monk and Robot Duology by Becky Chambers would be an excellent pick for this, and they're lovely books. And then to reach hard mode, T. Kingfisher's Sworn Soldier series. This is a trilogy of little novellas about Alex, and Alex is a sworn soldier that is essentially a non-binary knight from a made-up part of the world called Galatia. I really enjoyed the first one. The first one is like a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher. The second one was I didn't really like the second one as much, but I did read the third one that just came out most recently, and that one actually took place in the United States. It was related to I think it was a Kentucky mine, like mining, coal mining, and I thought that one was really good. I liked it much better than the second one. You could read the first one and not read the other ones. I really enjoyed all of the characters, Alex, and then Alex has a horse, and and a manservant that I just really like. And I loved Alex's sense of humor, and particularly Alex's sense of humor in the United States interacting with Americans was like my favorite thing. Next up, this is a problem square for me. So published in the 70s. Last year's Our Fantasy Bingo had published in the 80s, and that was a difficulty for me. Published in the 70s is even more of a difficulty for me. I think I own a whopping one book, and I hope I still own it. I don't even know if I still own it, that meets this criteria. It's pretty self-explanatory. Read a book that was published anywhere from 1970 to 1979. Hard mode this year is written by a woman. I got very few options here. I don't have anything to suggest. I was lucky. I found a book published in the 80s last year. It was the Discworld book. Right now, I have Watership Down by Richard Adams on this list because I own it, and it is a book that I've owned, and it meets the criteria. This was the one that last year I was like, oh, I might have to swap the square out, but I ended up not having to. So if anybody has suggestions for published in the 70s, please leave them in the comments. Oh my gosh, if they have published in the 60s next year, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Oh my gosh. Translated is another one that frequently shows up on their cards. It's one that I'm becoming more excited about. I think that this falls into a niche fit. This is one, well, no, actually, I'm gonna go intentional. This is one that I believe is serving the purpose of Our Fantasy. It is forcing you to seek out new authors. There are tons of lists of translated works of fantasy, sci-fi, and it's important that we look for works outside of our own world, because the point of reading these types of books is to hear about other worlds and other personalities and other points of view. The hard mode for this is translated into the language within the past 5 years, so it's a pretty recent translated work. The book that I read last year was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This was translated from French. I can't remember when. I want to say it was like 2019 or something like that. Don't quote me on the year. I have since realized how many more works are translated, the importance of reading books from other worlds outside of, the Western hemisphere and the Western point of view. And so these are very intentional picks. If I focus on books that I own The Master and the Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. Bulgakov, I said that right. But I don't know if I'm quite in a place where I can put the effort and energy into reading that. So the other book that I have that I am interested in is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. I've heard a lot about it. It sounds right up my alley, and I think it's important that we seek out these types of books. Okay, last but not least, small or self-published. This is another one where I think it's intentional. This is another one where it is serving the purpose of Our Fantasy. So this is a standard square that they always have, small press or self-published. So read a book that was not published by the Big Five, and then they have a little hyperlink for the Big Five. I think we don't realize how many books are actually published by the Big Five, if you will. That being said, it is becoming a lot easier for people to self-publish. That doesn't mean that they're all good. It is a lot easier to find works and support small published authors and indie authors. Last year, I read Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. Really enjoyed it. Have since purchased the next one. So if you're looking for other recommendations for this, I will post a link to the official SPFBO's SPFBO website, which was started by Mark Lawrence, who is an author. It was a blog that has a list of finalists for the SPFBO awards. Goodreads also has a list of SPFBO. SPFBO is Small Press Fiction. Oh, I forget what the FBO stands for, sorry. But it's basically a website that features small press books. So if you're looking for other recommendations, I'll post that in the information below. I think we also don't realize how many books are... You were going to make it into this video too, even though I have this whole desk here? That's kind of impressive, sir. Now you're really covering my face. You just got to be in everything, don't you? There you go. No, keep moving. Personally, I didn't even realize some of these were small publishing, self-published books, but I own Strange Beast by Susan J. Morris and Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson, which I mentioned earlier. Those are both small press, self-published books that I own that I plan to read that will meet this criteria. So here we go. Here's my final tier ranking of all of the different squares. This is my own personal ranking of all of these different categories. Obviously, they might be different for you. I think that some Some of these you really do need to seek out new authors, which is what you're supposed to do. You might need to seek out some new trope to find out what's interesting to you. My experience is that the best made plans kind of blow up about halfway through, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you accidentally stumble across works that meet criteria, and then you're like, oh yeah, I did read that. It really is fun. I highly recommend giving it a try. Even if you're just gonna go for a regular bingo, you don't have to get a full blackout. Keep an eye out in July. I'll post a mid our fantasy bingo check-in video, and we can see how I'm doing, how my plans have changed. Now I'm gonna go and watch everyone else's videos so I can see what other recommendations I can get. Until next time, happy reading!